Hello, good morning, Georgi here. Wanted to dive back into one of the videos I talked about recently on my interpretation of the most hated figure that everybody doesn't like, right, in the world, Trump, Donald Trump, right? And so I wanted to actually give you my perception and actually tell you, from my interpretation, and just to really tell you why he's probably the most hated figure in the world, because and sometimes when we've grown so oblivious and confused that we have no choice but to basically spread hate or spill false lies or false data on someone, well, essentially, we don't know, right? And because, after learning from wise people, the wise people would tell you this lesson: don't hate on someone if you don't know them. The question I thought of and contemplated so much about, hearing of previous people who've talked about growing away from their bitterness, growing away from just different hates of ideology, or people that have been influenced by ideologies. In particular, this question brings up a lot is, how can you hate me when you don't know me? How can you hate me when you don't know me? You can just as well read data. You can just as well read links in mainstream links that spill you particularly, because yes, we are or would be just as oblivious to think that we can spread easy hate and not just as well take the time to get to know the backstory. One of the lessons I have learned, just from my perspective, is I study the backstory of any known critic, right? Everybody can be known as a critic, whether they are good critics or they are bad critics. Good critics are good, particularly being Trump himself. He's a good critic because he's not only hated, but he's more drawn into the enemies of the world, because the enemies of the world want to actually get to know more of him. You look back of his previous experience, and again, this is my unvarnished truth to you, the audience. I want to give you from my interpretation. You can just as well, like I said before, hate me, put all the hate mail, but I'm not going to read it about it. Honestly, I'm going to give it to you from my interpretation and just keep going from what I observe. So the interpretation to give you the most clean slate of details. And I can just as well give you evidence of links or credible details that I've come across from people that have talked about the good and the bads of Trump's character. So to tell you why I wanted to give you the most unvarnished truth of why Trump claimed that he wants to come back for the second time. Not just particularly spilling you about why he's coming back biblically, but I give you just as amount of good data that I have found out from my interpretation. So he's coming back because he has experience. He has established credibility, not just because he ran for four terms, but because he has actually also got to know the American history. He studied the systems. He studied the world finance systems. He's been around the world, particularly why the critics of the world, yes, hate him, because at the same time, they don't know him. Whether you think that you're hated, or you're going to know that the more times you hate your enemy, for all the haters that hate Trump, okay, you're obviously jealous. You're obviously envious because you hate him, right? So you obviously know the obvious answer to that question. Now I'm going to tell you, maybe one day you'll think you can get back to re-emulating and re-getting any negotiated ideas to actually talk to him. You can just as well think that any critic or a hater has rhetoric. Yes, I understand. The rhetoric, reasonable factors, helps also get the point across. One of the things that we like to sugarcoat things because we don't want to hide away from the scare, from the most softer or unrealistic things. We want to be able to face it. We want to be able to confront it. One of the things that you get back to any video recordings that you've heard about Trump, or tweets that mainstream media screams about Trump. Trump did this. Trump just posted this fact. Obviously, you would think that you're oblivious to seeing it, right? Yes, you would. But in this case, you actually have to look back the backstory of why he posted it. It's not because he's screaming about any unreasonable or various number of doubts that he's had towards some of the establishments, which in this case, of course, he has. So, the unvarnished truth of why he's coming back, to tell you and to give you a more glimpse of an idea, is that he wants to be able to reshape the economy, the American economy, and the perspectives, and just as well as how well the other world economies outside the U.S. economy, most of the strong-centered government systems are jealous towards the economic systems of America because they are trying to emulate from Trump's ideas. If Trump's idealistic methods to reshape America's economy, he can just as well make it more successful, and the world leaders can emulate his ideas to basically reshape all the countries' economic systems. Not just Iran, not just China in particular, because I mean, we're so jealous and hated by China, obviously, and also some other countries that are cooped up with the China government economic sanctions or development economic principles. So getting back particularly to the Trump's ideas and him coming back, love him, hate him, don't like him, it's up to you whether you decide to vote for him in the ballot box. It also really comes down to is this question, and we talk about money every day. Are you making better than what you were making 4 years ago? Is your wallet empty every day? Are you making less money than what you were making 4 years ago? You think in terms of, what we make from our wallets, right? Because how much, obviously, gas we're spending today, how much of fuel economy that we spend on the cars that we drive, and in terms of the impact of the inflation rate, and now the increase of the national debt limit, now it comes down to a point where we can actually look to someone like Trump who can get an idea of how much economic methods he can reshape. Obviously, we got one of the most natural-based resources in the U.S. Particularly, I talk in perspectives of, all right, I'm a Georgian. I was born in the Republic of Georgia, which was with Soviet Union. I talk from my observation and perspective of, okay, why I grew up in this country, because the America is the land of the free and the opportunity that you can do to contribute and compete economically, right? Perhaps if you look at the backstories of previous U.S. government administrations, obviously they've had softer policy in which, of course, they have been suckered to some of the other world economic-based policy. So, get my point here. Trump is trying to tell the crowd, all of the crowd of people, and I'm telling you from my perspective, as I am not bragging excessively about him, I'm just trying to get an understanding from a realist perspective why I'm telling you this, because obviously you want to know what you want to be doing in 4 to 5 years from now, right? I'm sure you want to be able to be successful and produce. So in the perspectives of him coming back and helping to reshape the American economy, but not just also the economy itself, but also the world economic principles to help influence the American values. People want to be able to have values, and that's one of the things that Trump talked about. Trump talks about values. People want to be able to have values that things that you want to do every day to match your values. Softer, regulated, and strenuous policies will not promote your future values. If your values would think that you want to be able to compete economically and be able to start a business like what most people are doing, right? Small businesses are a big factor to, again, why it creates jobs. And then bigger-based companies in the private enterprise systems also give jobs, but also are accounted for ethically when companies don't follow rules, right? We want to follow rules. Trump just as well wants to follow rules. He wants to be able to make people accountable to make sure that they follow the rules. Get the ethics in, good ethics in, and get the bad ethics out. Trump says, okay, we have some bad dudes in this country. the bad dudes or the bad people. They like to do evil. They like to do the wrong deeds. Okay, he wants to get those bad people out so he doesn't have to come across, or nor would you want to have to come across poison being spread across the country. Because if you look at it from the bigger picture, and I'll tell you, not just from an economic standpoint, not just from the government standpoint, I tell you from my perspective as a realist, okay, we are witnessing a poison being spread over, parasites of diseases of the fentanyl, which has been around for a long time, the diseases of the softer policies that's motivated today's government systems to unfortunately succor to the mainstream establishments. Now, I give you this unvarnished truth because I want you to make this decision for yourself. I want you to decide, as a messenger, to tell you, you have to reshape the decisions for the next upcoming general election for the America's presidential hopeful winner, whether it being Donald Trump, whether it being Ron DeSantis, but you must decide for yourself. Whether you are a Democrat, Republican, Independent, but at least come to sense. Who are you going to vote for? Because mostly, every day, we think from our wallets, the money that we put into the wallets, credit cards that we carry. We want to be able to at least conserve and also have different idea of knowledge to be able to produce more. If you think that your values might match to the Trump's typical method of economic principles and his long-term goals, if you look at it more attentively, you just might pick up some of the things that he's mentioned in his speeches to be able to keep America great again, to get the economy back on track to where it was before. He's not just bragging it again. He's more so just repeating it so that way it also elaborates and expands like a nursing rhyme rhythm. You know how you play a violin or a certain instrument? The analogy of playing an instrument. You play a method of rhythms, beats. You play the same tone, repeat it, providing that they're good and repeatable tones. It's just like playing a saxophone, having good rhythm of beats. It's just the same analogy of basically, okay, a hopeful politician who runs for office, they want to be able to spread good messages and hopeful goals for the economy, right? And we decided to put them in the office. Whether 3 to 4 years later from now they follow through what they said, it's up to them whether they've accomplished it, whether they notice it. Now, certainly, of course, we want to be able to follow through what we said. Or a lot of things are even just as yet distracted by the barriers that we come across. Because there are barriers. We do have barriers. We do want to be able to embrace the barriers, but not bring us down a lot. This is one of also the analogy lessons that even, okay, Trump himself, who has presented in most of his speeches, you obviously think that, okay, you're jealous of him because you don't know his backstory. You're jealous of him because you haven't really studied further to critical figures like him, right? And of course, in most cases, why we had sometimes grown oblivious to our confusion is as a result, we've come across the barriers. The barriers was what's distracted us to not focus on the good fruits of a figure like Trump himself or like President Xi Jinping from China. Obviously, they have good critical figures that they've done enough to help preserve their economic principles. But mind you, if you think that this was too much, if you think that this is so much of an oblivion controversial, like it, dislike it, subscribe to it if you want to as well. But this is my unvarnished truth to you and to give you the perspectives of good things can come. Okay? Any hater or a hated figure might just as well bring good things, even though when you don't think that they're going to bring it back or be able to follow through on the promises, you obviously think that person's not doing the good job, right? you would ask the question, okay, today, is Joe Biden doing a good job today? Is he doing a good job in today's economic principles of what he has been able to, yes, improve on his Build Back Better plan, but what about the backstory of the economic follow-up to, in today's condition of gas prices, today's condition of the inflation rate, today's condition of why we're spending so much, basically, why we're spending so much money buying groceries or going out to eat. That's another matter, right? Why we're spending so much money out of our wallets to be able to maintain the mortgage expenses. You can see the examples, you can see the data, you can see just as well, read between the lines, but I can give you just as much simple and varnished truth by paying attention to the details. When you're looking for headlines, when you're reading through the news, you can just as well get distracted easily, right? But remember to retain your investments. That was another concept that I picked up from Trump's understanding. Retain your investments, because your investments just as more important to your health, wealth, and your financial future. So I hope you take this lightly. And of course, I've enlightened you enough, and I hope to also touch back up on this topic and enlighten you with some more awesome topics. All right, everybody, take care.